is very proudly brought to you by Pick Drop. A little bit more about them later on. How's it? Welcome back to TPE with a new environment. Yes, we've moved. As they say, a change is as good as a rest. So I have repurposed this room in my house and turned it into TPE HQ just to move out of the kitchen so I don't have to keep setting up and striking down every time I want to make a video. Now, a lot of people, when they think about taking photographs that have emotion in them or personality, will think about faces. This is only natural, isn't it? You know, hey, we're going to take pictures of people's faces and they will convey an emotion. But when I look at the work of Ezra Stoller, who is an exceptionally famous architectural photographer, I see that if you are aligned with the vibe that the scene in front of you is giving you, then you can bring emotion and personality from inanimate objects. It's funny when I think back on my photographic career, because I didn't want to necessarily be a photographer. I actually wanted to be an architect. And yet, this is how I've ended up making my living. Probably that's for the best, because my maths is not so great. I think architecturally speaking, it would have been a bit of a problem. However, it does mean that I absolutely love architectural photography. There's something about it, I was about to say the staidness about images, but it isn't. I think it's the preciseness. But within that preciseness, there is so much scope to let the personality that the architect will have has imbued with that photo, the building, to come through into that photograph. And we're talking about it with Nick Carver the other day. I was discussing how, like, when we're in a space and we're kind of like on the same wavelength as that place, it will then speak to us. In Nick's case, he's got some liminal spaces, things of that nature. But I love the fact that he can bring that personality of that building, that place, that environment through in his images. And Ezra Stoller is the same. And I think there's a huge amount of lessons that we can learn as photographers from Ezra Stoller's work. However, if you don't know who he is, you're scratching your head going, who is this Ezra Stoller? I'm about to give you a little bit of a background. So my little book of words here says that Ezra Stoller was born in Chicago in 1915. He studied architecture at NYU. And as a student, he began photographing buildings. And around about 1938, he graduated with a BFA and ended up working with Paul Strand. Now, Paul Strand is like an amazing photographer. And I'm so envious of these people who are able to go and cut their teeth with these influential figures in photography. But be that as may, he worked with Paul Strand throughout the Second World War, and afterwards he continued his career as an architectural photographer and started focusing on sort of industrial and scientific commissions. And I love industrial photography. There's something about it that just, I think it really appeals to me, that you see these beasts of machines that often people would just kind of look at as this kind of massive technological thing that just stomps all over creativity. But when you look deeper into those machines, the aesthetics to them, there's something rather beautiful about, especially the repetition. So Ezra Stoller is photographing all these wonderful commissions, and over the next 4 years, he becomes ultimately best known for his pictures of buildings. And so many famous buildings from that period are now recognized through the images that Stoller was creating. The reason why, I think, and this is where, bios of people on websites are so helpful, is that it says here on Stoller's site that his images convey this experience of architecture. This is kind of cool, experience of architecture, because buildings aren't really designed to just be looked at. They're designed to be used, to lived in, to work in, and he says that they use a two-dimensional medium. So that's photography. Obviously it's a flat medium, but then with his careful attention to sort of vantage point lighting conditions, as well as factors like sort of line and color and form and texture, what have you, that he brings those buildings to life. So how can we, as wannabe architectural photographers, actually not wannabe architectural photographers, because this can be applied to any genre of photography, but how can we allow these inanimate objects to bring their own vibe to us? One of the things that came up when I was chatting with Nick is he mentioned that he doesn't like to photograph with a whole bunch of other people. And I can sympathize with that, because what happens is when we're out photographing with people, we're interacting with the person. We're not letting the environment seep into us. I think in this regard, landscape photographers are so lucky because they get a chance just to be there in the environment. Hopefully, there's not loads of people around all shooting from the same tripod holes, but to feel that landscape, reach out, show them something that it's not showing anybody else. And with Ezra Stoller's work, and I know this is like a wonderful. I have a whole heap of his books, right? But if I look through these photographs, and obviously the ones that I've been showing on screen, the places feel real, which is a weird thing to say, because they are obviously buildings, they are physically real objects, but they don't feel like a set. They're not clinical, they're precise, and I enjoy looking at them. I enjoy the feeling that these have actually been put together with care and attention, and the quality and the lighting and everything like that is beautiful, but they are giving the building the environment, the feeling, the vibe that I think the architect was hoping when they were sketching out the ideas. Often the buildings have environment around them to give it context, to show off the best vantage points, to give a feeling of what it would be like to inhabit this space. All right, so just a quick word about today's fabulous sponsor, PicDrop. Now, I've been using PicDrop for a number of years now, and I found the intuitive nature of using their online image sharing service to be an absolute godsend. It doesn't matter if I'm creating galleries to have people upload their images to for one of our cohort meetings or some image feedback, or just asking people to submit photographs from the newsletter about a theme of the week. The ability to create the gallery, to say, here's a link, upload your images. You can see how useful that would be if you were also running a camera club, if you were, a photographer taking commissions, that you do a shoot, you upload the images, and then you can go on there and say, look, to the client, here's the link, go and you tell me the ones that you like. It makes that proofing process so easy. And as I said, I've been using it within the TP tribe, within the cohorts, to great effect. And I would highly recommend that you go out and check out their 2-month free trial. There's a link in the description box below. So yeah, massive thank you to PicDrop, which means that we are able to cover videos like this, talking about Ezra Stoller. These kind of videos don't really do very well in the YouTube algorithm because it's not about sharpness or anything. So having people like PicDrop and people in the TP tribe support the channel means that we can make more content like this. Now, if I think about, I was a wannabe architectural genius, and then I came back to the camera. To begin with, when I used this, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to take photographs of people doing their emotions. That's what really brings in emotional impact. And it was difficult initially to get a feel for the buildings, to get a feel for places, to allow that to speak to me. And I found that aside from being like Nick, we photograph alone, we let the quietness take over. I also found that it was important to be true to myself, as a photographer, as much as I wanted to be like a hardcore, oh my god, like so like in your face Anton Corbijn kind of chap, ultimately when I am the most successful I feel with my own images, it is when it is in a more structured approach. So with Ezra, large format cameras, it's not just running around happy snappy, it's an approach. It's thinking what looks best here. Having an empathy also helps with the thing that he's photographing. He studied architecture. He's connected with it. Think about in your own photography, enjoyment. What are you most connected with? What can you have an intuitive understanding for that feels personal? Photograph that. Photograph it in a way that isn't necessarily, from my own perspective, relying on visual trickery or what have you, but allowing the subject to be itself, to treat it with empathy, to allow it just to say what it wants to say. It's not actually that difficult to do. You just need a pair of ears just to kind of quieten down for a moment and be in a space. Let it speak to us. I hope that you enjoy this new set. I like it too. I've got my sort of coffee. I've got my cameras. I've got books. I've got a table. All kind of good stuff. Thank you ever so much for watching. If you are interested in the TPE tribe, where we talk about this kind of stuff all the time, there is also a link underneath the pig drop in the description box. Until next time, thanks ever so much, and go and listen to what your pictures have to say.